At Odyssey, we focus on one thing. We work with our ride-hailing partners to make urban transportation smarter and more efficient. And we do that by measuring a couple of KPIs. The first one is on-trip time, and that is how long does the vehicle actually be on trip. On trip is the only time the vehicle is commercial. The rest of the time it's either deadheading, looking for revenue, or in other ways, non-productive. And the second thing is how much revenue do we generate per hour of operations. We've been working this model successfully with the biggest ride-hailing companies in London for a while now. And as London progresses and moves towards autonomy, I will argue that these are two KPIs that become central to how fast autonomy can be, to how efficient autonomy can be, and how we can scale autonomy in service of London. Let's dive in. London is one of the most vibrant cities and one of the biggest geo markets in the world. There are over 300,000 taxi and private hire rides that take place. Taxi and private hire is a term that's used to cover all ride-hailing, taxi, Ubers, Bolts, all of these chauffeur journeys that take place. So there are over 300,000 of these rides taking place every day in London. This industry is serviced by over 100,000 taxi private hire vehicles, which are licensed by Transport for London. Now, here's the kicker. The average speed of movement for these vehicles through the city, and this is our data, corroborated by other operators' data as well, is about 9 miles per hour, slower in peak times. That's slower than a bicycle moves. So here's some key points that we observe as we look at this ecosystem as we move towards autonomy. First, London doesn't have a supply problem. We keep talking about driver shortages, we keep talking about vehicle shortages, but there are plenty of these vehicles that could actually take care of the demand. Of course, London is one of the biggest demand zones in the world. London has an efficiency problem. And that is one of the key issues that autonomy will solve. We certainly cannot do anything. I think it was reflected upon earlier in the morning as well. We certainly can't do anything about increasing the speed in the city. That's just how we are, and we love it. It is about efficient utilization. Efficient utilization is about putting the right vehicle at the right time, at the right place. What we call this is intelligent demand response. That's a term that we borrowed from the energy industry, but it's looking at how demand shapes up in London throughout the day. Demand is not static. Demand is something which is expressed in a single number, 300,000 rides a day. But it is extremely dynamic as you look across the city. And our challenge is vehicles have to move from one place to the other to efficiently meet that demand. So increasing efficiency is something that we call fleet orchestration, which is what a tech company or a fleet operator like us does. Let's see how we do this in practice. So here in London, we've got the map of London. We've divided it into a hexagon grid. And each hex in this grid is representing not just the quality, not just where it is, but the intensity of demand. And you can see this demand move throughout the day by intensity spreading across as the commute hour moves from school hour to commute hour to evening hour, nighttime leisure activities. This is dynamically changing. And in a city that moves at 9 miles per hour, you cannot move your vehicles as and when demand changes. So there's a bit of pre-planning that is needed, and that's how we are doing it. We are picking up signals not just from demand, but also from a number of other things. Vehicle telemetry signals, external data, that's events, that's, if there's a tube strike, there's weather, there's traffic data, there's energy and charging state of the vehicle. All of this data goes into the brain of the system, and then it tries to reposition vehicles well in advance, writing schedules for how the vehicles could be positioned a week in advance, a day in advance, during the day, hour on hour, trip by trip. That's how we position our vehicles to accept the jobs, to decline the jobs, to assign zones to cover. This is what we call fleet orchestration. Great plan. But how does it physically come about? So fleet orchestration is how we are positioning or planning for our vehicles to run throughout the day. One of the key metrics that I had mentioned earlier was on-trip time. So if you look at how, in the gig world, how fleet orchestration has worked, about more than 60% of the time, the vehicles are actually not utilized. So this is a main problem that ride-hailing systems currently face. By using fleet orchestration, what we've managed to do is we've managed to flip this on its head. And over 60% of the time, the vehicles that Odysse manages are actually utilized. They're actually on trip. This is a key game changer which starts to build, whether you're looking at alleviating congestion or better use of vehicles, on-trip time is a key metric that we follow. This is a key contributor to the scale. Now, when we talk about scaling the vehicle, we believe in the ecosystem coming together to make sure that scaling is happening as we think scaling should. There is plenty of demand in London. We've already seen that. And there are ride-hailing platforms, champions who can bring this demand together. They already exist, aggregators, taxi private hire companies. So they're taking care of the demand here. The driverless component, the second D in this, is where the OEMs and the AV tech companies come together. There's a lot of focus on the driverless side of things. Obviously, we can't go driverless if the tech doesn't work. But these companies are making strides in putting these vehicles and the AV tech stacks together. The third part is deployment. And this is where I argue the system will either scale or stall. And this is about putting these vehicles in the right place in the right time. That's the fleet utilization or the fleet orchestration part. It is about the online as well as the offline operations. The offline operations are when the vehicle is not actually in service. That's the charging, the cleaning, the getting the vehicle ready. But it's the online component of it where the vehicle is supposed to be working, as one of our panelists said, 20 hours a day. That really becomes the key of whether autonomy will scale, how quickly and how efficiently these vehicles are deployed. That becomes a key contributor to how this ecosystem will scale. And our bet is that orchestration is the real key to scalability. What you see here is our second KPI. The second KPI was how much revenue is generated per hour of online operations. So we started at a baseline. We analyzed the data through over 1 million plus electric miles that we did in the city. We analyzed that data through hundreds of thousands of passenger journeys that took place. And we started applying fleet orchestration logic to the whole thing, using machine learning, using compute technologies that weren't even possible 3-4 years ago. And what we noticed was we were able to create a step change in how much revenue can be generated per online hour of these vehicles. And then we increased that to a game-changing number, which is of particular interest as London starts to look towards autonomy. When you start to look at, in simplistic terms, replacing ride-hail vehicles, essentially a Toyota Prius as the model ride-hail vehicle, the cost of an entry-level Ferrari all in, when you start to replace the driver of those vehicles, somebody who's earning a modest income, with machine learning engineers who are not one for one, but replacing that whole system, you have to look at the economics of this whole thing. And that's where we believe the economics, looking at the on-trip time, looking at how much revenue we can generate, is that fleet orchestration is one of the keys to sustainability. Now, we're too small and too busy to compete with anyone. We are looking at this whole system from a citywide perspective of increasing utilization for a fleet of vehicles. And we therefore believe the future of urban autonomy will be not about how many vehicles are added, and I think the panels before me agree with that. It's about how efficiently we deploy them. And that's where we look forward to being a part of the solution and bringing autonomy to London. Thank you.